Hello everyone, my name is Sean and welcome to my channel where I talk about languages and the people who speak them. Today is a bit different because while we're talking about a language, I want to keep it short and focus on a particular and very unusual case of language revitalization, which I find to be very interesting and quite inspirational. Today we're talking about the Eyak language, also known as the Honhyunga. The Eyak language is native to the modern-day region of Cordova in south-central Alaska, around the mouth of the Copper River. It's part of the Na-Dene language family, technically forming its own branch within it, and it's distantly related to the Athabascan languages such as the Naina, for example, which I made a video about, but also Chipewyan, Apache, Navajo, though that connection is like really far out there. Now, sadly, on January 21st, 2008, the Eyak language had been declared to be extinct, because the last fluent native speaker and the last full-blooded ethnic Eyak, Mary Smith Jones, passed away. May her memory live on for generations to come. However, since then, and especially over the last couple of years, there have been plenty of efforts underway to preserve and revitalize the Eyak language within the community, as there are still a few hundred people out there who identify themselves as at least partly Eyak, and who are members of the federally recognized Eyak Nation, and who still very much care about the preservation of their historical cultural practices and traditions. But that's today. In 2008, with the untimely death of Mary Smith Jones, stuff didn't seem as bright. Never again would anybody have as much fluency in the language as her, and it really seemed like the end of an era. And then, out of nowhere, a random dude from France just walks in, starts speaking fluent Eyak like nobody's business, and gives the whole community a ton of hope and motivation to fight for their language. Introducing Guillaume Ledoué, a French linguist and polyglot from Le Havre in France. And this guy is insane. Besides Eyak, he speaks French, English, German, Chinese, Georgian, some Lithuanian, and probably a bunch of others. Like, damn, nice mix of everything. That is really, really cool. But we're getting a bit ahead of ourselves. Let's rewind a bit. Born in 1989, Mr. Ledoué showed a fascination towards languages from an early age, and was always learning to speak something new. In the words of an Anchorage Daily News article, as a boy in France, Ledoué dreamed of learning Lithuanian while other kids played PlayStation. Top-notch journalism right there. This line was just strangely hilarious to me. Anyway, as a kid in the early days of the internet, Ledoué happened upon a documentary made in 1995 about Mary Smith Jones, the last native speaker of the Eyak language. He was fascinated, started learning more about it, and then actually got in contact with Laura Bliss-Spann, the filmmaker who directed the documentary, and actually convinced her to send him some instructional DVDs for learning Eyak. And the rest is history. A teenager now, Ledoué began learning Eyak very quickly, and even began exchanging emails with the Eyak Preservation Council. In an interview, he once actually said, "I learned Eyak at the same time I was learning English," which is a pretty boss thing to say, really. But then, sometime later, Laura Bliss-Spann actually went to France and met with Ledoué. Then he got in contact with the man, the myth, the legend, Michael E. Krauss, who we'll talk more about in a second, and in July 2010, Ledoué actually visited Cordova, Alaska to get further training in the Eyak language and its preservation. Michael E. Krauss was an American linguist who contributed an insane amount of knowledge about the native languages of Alaska, and just in general, he was a very strong and outspoken advocate for endangered languages across the world, encouraging the global community to document and preserve their languages. But more importantly for this video, he was the #1 specialist in the Eyak language. He began working on the language way back in 1963 when there were only 6 speakers left. In 2010, when Ledoué met with him, Krauss was already 75 years old and retired. On top of that, the last native speaker of the language, Mary Smith Jones, had passed away 2 years before that. And so to have a random guy from thousands of kilometers away seemingly just fall out of the sky and help carry on the torch for the Eyak language and all the people who have worked for decades to document it is just bonkers. Of whom, by the way, there are so many. Michael E. Krauss actually published an article in which he lists everyone who did something related to Eyak ever since the Europeans stumbled upon them in the late 1700s. Link in the description. The document is actually dedicated to Frederica de Laguna, an Alaskan ethnologist, anthropologist, and archaeologist who worked closely with Krauss during a career spanning many decades of fascinating research, and she also contributed immensely to the preservation of the Eyak language. Mary Smith Jones's granddaughter is also working to revitalize the language. She actually helped start the Eyak language revitalization project. Also, another thing, I randomly happened upon a forum post from 2011 where someone says, "I think I am the last person who can speak Eyak fluently." And it just goes on with people telling him, no, Eyak is extinct, and he just goes like, no, that's wrong. I still speak it fluently and would like to pass my knowledge on. And then the trail goes cold. I mean, it does sort of coincide with the timeline of Ledway going to visit Alaska, so by this point, he had a very solid base in Eyak, so this might be him. But then again, why would he ever post something like this, especially since he got all the media attention before that? I don't know, whoever this is, it's quite the mystery. I mean, there might still be a secret fluent Eyak speaker out there that we don't know of. And that's the story, pretty much. From what I could gather, Ledway still works in cooperation with the Eyak Preservation Council. He helps teach native Eyaks their language, of which he is now considered to be a fluent speaker of, and I'm sure he's continuing to learn and spread awareness of other endangered languages out there. Oh, and apparently he's also a sculptor? Is there anything this guy can't do? Also, oh my god, I just realized something while recording the video. I went online to check up a small detail on Mary Smith Jones, and I realized that her native name in Eyak, which is this, actually translates to a sound that calls people from afar. What? What are the chances? There's actually a full documentary recently made about Ledway and his journey to help revive the Eyak language, called On the Tip of the Tongue, and I'm gonna leave a link in the video description below to an article about the documentary, and I highly recommend that you check it out. But yeah, it's a crazy, highly unlikely story, and I hope you've learned something new from it, and maybe even found some motivation to do some language preservation yourself? Don't let me stop you! In any case, thank you so much for watching, hope you have a great day and a wonderful night. Peace out. Qadashyakh yinhinu. Wahonch iya. Hola kchad. Waqach at ida dakhah.